Thanks so much for coming out on a Friday. Sa mga nag-leave sa work, maraming salamat din. We will try to make your leave as soon as possible and ensure it will be with our conversations this afternoon. At sisimulan ko na syempre. Of course, I am here on behalf of Paano Ba To, the podcast. Of course, powered by Anima Podcasts. Woohoo! And sa Paano Ba To, to those of you who do listen, to all our supers, it is a podcast answering any question about life, issues we may have. And so, nung sinabihan ako that we are going to have a podcast festival, our podcasters, or those who want to start their own podcast. And so, I guess what I wanted to talk to you about is, paano ba yun? Paano ba maging interesting? Paano ba hindi maging boring? And it's not just for podcasters, this is for people who are creating their own videos, creating their own content, people presenting at work, students who have to present in school, di ba? Parang kung meron akong tatanungan ng communication skills questions, I want to know boy ang
That's a tough question. How do you become interesting? Not just in podcasts, but in life.
Yes.
The first thing that comes to mind is, if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. Diba? Yeah, you really have to be interested so that you can be interesting. But more than that, it's a very complex operation of personal branding. Where do you start? Just show up and do it. Lalo na sa podcasting. I had a podcast, I think in 2020.
Yes, okay. So Tito Boy has podcast. Who are you when no one is looking?
I did a podcast called Who Are You No One Is Watching. And then,
Watching.
yeah, watching. Who are you no one is watching? So one of the questions I would usually ask when we interview. But the thing is, you are saddled with a lot of problems when you're about to start something. Paano? Saan ako mag-umpisa? How do I start? Who is supposed to be with me? How am I going to do it? Who's going to take care of the technical? The best way to start really is just jump into it. Really. Jump into it. I was lucky because I was working with Mark Noveloso. And we really together. One of the best. He's one of the best writers. And this is a kind of writing, this is a kind of collaboration that you don't actually write what you're supposed to say. But you do a lot of conversations. You do a lot of conversations as to what you want to do, ano bang gusto natin gawin, ano ba ang maki-brand identity ako. Mahilig ako dun sa dami nang nagpo-podcast. I remember when I was doing the podcast. I went to everybody's podcast.
Market research.
Around the world. So I started to listen to as many podcasts as possible. And the first question of, anong gagawin ko na naiiba? Anong gagawin ko that will make me jump out of? Anong gagawin ko so I wouldn't blend? Again, that's very tough because sometimes not blending becomes your equity. But when you blend, there's a way of blending and standing out. So, tumalun ka, enjoy the journey, and I discovered that it was fun knowing what it was in a podcast while I was doing it. Pero importante that somebody guides you. Pero huwag mauna yung takot. Again, the question is how do you become interesting? Huwag ka dapat lumayo doon sa kung sino ka. Huwag ka dapat lumayo doon sa what is most interesting about you. And minsan kasi you cannot assess yourself. You need someone you trust. Mahirap. You need somebody you trust. Kasi I know I'm blabbering about a lot of things. It's a very complex operation. Like, what's boring to me may not be boring to you. What's interesting to me may not be interesting to them. So, in the end, you go back to what makes you feel good? What makes you feel happy? I mean, what do you want to talk about? What is it that you want to talk about? What is it that you want to share? At kadalasan yan comes from a place of, comes from a core story. Ako'y taga-Samar, iba ang tingin ko, ako'y Maray. I used to be so afraid about talking. I mean, nobody would believe that. Dahil natatapilog yung aking dila from E to E, O to O. Until I became so comfortable with it. Sometimes, how you become interesting is not giving in to the expectations of an audience. I could say, dal-dalang ng dal-dal yan. So, ano kaya? May mga episodes na dal-dal ng may episodes na hindi. And constant, consistent listening to yourself, to your audience, to your market. But the best way to answer that question is, if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. And do not be afraid to commit mistakes. It's fun. Committing mistakes, learning, falling, rising. Because I don't think, especially in podcasts, you really find the level of energy, what you really want to do. Of course, there's a format, but it's nice to get in and out of the format. Just a fun.
I, of course, agree 100% with everything Tito Boy said. And
This is going to stay for a long, long time. And there's certain sexiness about podcasts. It's going to last. It's going to be there. It's different. Yeah. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts now, from the political to the fashion to the personal. Iba yung texture. So, go for it. In terms of language, isang problema pa yun. Ano ba kung mag-English pa ako? Ano ba ang audience ko? Mag-Bisaya pa ako? You know, may public speaking classes. And in my dealings now with many experts in language, marami nilang sinasabi ngayon, not that I do not value and honor grammar and syntax, construction, etc. But understandability comes ahead of all of it. Make sure you're understood. If it's a mixture of Bisaya and Tagalog, it's fun. If you can do your intro in Chavacano, and that can be interesting. Again, you're going to your story. What if my OBB is done in the language of my youth, for example? Explore that. It's an exploration that's really interesting. And don't allow anybody to define what you do and who you are. Don't. You're the only one who knows that.